Hey guys, and welcome back. We're doing another system design video today. Today we're talking about the new generation armor in Destiny 2, and I think it's pretty important to look at systems like this when they're first announced and kind of try and give a little bit of feedback on potential pitfalls, especially coming from our software design background, but then also our player background, right? Like as an MMO player of a lot of years, this system is going to sound very familiar, right? So if you have that kind of experience, you might notice and foresee some of these pitfalls as well. All right, so to start us off really quickly, I just wanted to go ahead and actually read what uh, Bungie believes to be the problem with the current Armor 2.0 system, which I think is actually a very relevant piece of information for us to start with. So, the problem in the years since the last major update, Shadowkeep's Armor 2.0, Armor has settled into a relatively static part of our reward story. Once you have the right roles, there's very little else to look forward to, and the intricate balance of stat values has a lock-in effect that makes it hard to want to swap anything out anyway. For armor to be exciting, it needs to have some unique properties, and stats need to be easier to manage without so much need for fine-tuning. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I actually fully agree that that is actually one of the big problems in Destiny 2 right now is that people feel like there's not enough things to chase. There's not anything to grind out, there's nothing to look forward to, there's nothing to get excited about. And that is definitely something that they need to hit upon. And I do think changing armor in some of the ways that they're going to explain is actually a good way of doing that. However, there are some pretty glaring pitfalls and issues that we need to talk about and we need to discuss. All right, so Too Long Didn't Read. Their big change that they're going to make to armor is instead of having tiers every 10 points, every point is going to give you some benefit, which is good. We had dead stats before. You know, having 43 of a stat meant that you had 3 dead stats. You can only get to tier 4. And so that's a really good change. They're also going to add an increased cap from 101 to 200 here, and that's going to give you additional benefits. It does sound like they're not entirely sure yet what those additional benefits might be. You know, in some cases, I think they were giving an example of like it maybe your melee. If you have a higher value on the melee, there's a higher chance of doing like you hit twice instead of just punching once kind of thing. That's not set in stone. That's fine. That all sounds good to me. You don't want dead stats and more specific builds that you can make. You know, instead of trying to go for triple hundreds, you try and go maybe just 201 thing. So yeah, that all sounds good. And then what they're doing down here is that they're changing armor so that it's going to be heavily focused in 3 stats. So in this case, it's a strength piece of armor for the primary stat, if you look here, and secondary stat for discipline, and then the tertiary stat is intellect. Obviously going the most stat in the first one, second stat has the second most, third stat has just a little bit as well. These are all really good things. I think this will help people look at their armor and know what it is they're going for, and then also knowing like which pieces they care about and which pieces they don't care about. If it has the wrong primary stat on it, they're not going to go for it. This is actually something that most MMOs do. If you go and look at WoW, and I'll show you in a little bit, WoW has primary stat, which is something that I'll talk about as well. It's a little bit different in WoW, and I think actually better in WoW. But then you have 2 secondary stats on each piece of gear, and that really makes it easy to look at the gear and decide whether or not it has the correct stats, and if it doesn't have the correct stats, it's not what you want. And so, like I said, that makes it a lot easier to look at something, know you want it, know that you don't want it, and kind of move. On top of that, they're also going to be introducing set bonuses. And here is kind of where you'll see later on that I see some of their issues stemming from. As well as the stat bonuses, we'll talk about that more when we start trying to break it down and stuff. But let's just talk about what they're doing. So they're just doing set bonuses. They want you to think of them like armor or origin traits, basically. So they give some examples on 2 and 4 piece sets. Again, pretty common in terms of like tier sets and stuff like that for WoW. Everyone's used to 2 and 4 piece sets. You have 1 extra slot left over for your exotic piece or something like that. So like Tex Mechanica, while shooting from the hip, you have increased movement speed and weapon handling. Effect increases when you score hits, and then Tex Mechanica again for the 4-piece. Weapons have increased range and accuracy. But then if you look a little bit down here, you might see some other ones that seem like they're quite a bit stronger. Right? So final blows with freshly reloaded weapons heal you. That sounds like a pretty interesting heal clip effect. And then damaging a target with a shotgun or fusion rifle increases the damage it takes from those weapons for a short period of time. That seems much better than having increased hipfire accuracy and movement speed. Direct hits with explosive weapons temporarily increase the reload speed. Okay, fast reload, more damage. Repeated direct hits with explosive weapons temporarily increase grenade ability recharge. Again, kind of sounding like probably better range and accuracy and hipfire, right? So what you're kind of seeing already is that like these set bonuses are not going to be equal. Activating your grenade gives you and nearby allies damage resistance against combatants, and then defeating champions with a finisher generates special ammo for you and your Spire team. Special ammo finisher, right? So these again, these are already we're already seeing like and to be fair, these are early, right? Like I'm sure they're gonna go through a lot of balance and stuff like that, but we're already seeing clear discrepancies in terms of like which ones are good and which ones are bad. And this is kind of where I see one of several problems with this whole scenario so far. You know, something I really want to reiterate on, and something that I've seen go around, especially the Destiny community for a while, is that, you know, after they explain stuff to us, like, you'll see people say it all the time on Reddit and stuff like that. Like, wait till you have it in your hands to critique it and stuff like that. But no, like, that's actually not what you want people to do. You shouldn't, like, I'm not saying we condemn anybody for anything, right? If any bad choices that they end up making or whatever. The point of this is all to give constructive feedback and help them. You know, they're still in the design process for this. They still don't know what these set bonuses are going to be, right? Maybe they actually see, you know, feedback like this and they say, okay, well, this is actually something we need to consider. The set bonuses need to be different enough, or they need to be location based or whatever. And so they're still in the process where they can change things, and that's when you want feedback. That's when you want feedback. If we don't give feedback and it gets all the way to the point where you get it in your hands, like, I can tell you as a developer, things are way harder to change at that point. Like, it is so much easier that when like things are in development to change things if you need to change them. And so giving feedback early and often is actually extremely helpful for the developer. For a little bit behind the scenes, when I am making an application for somebody and I am looking to get feedback, I'm not doing it at the end. I'm getting feedback as we go through the entire process. And so literally what will happen is I'll work on something and I'll be like, okay, you know, how's this looking? How's this feeling for you? And then, you know, oftentimes you have somebody try and use it, whether it be in the prototyping stages or whatever. But getting that feedback is something that I go out of my way to get early. And again, often. You don't want your customer to get it in their hands and get the wrong thing or have it not work the way that they need it to work, right? And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is we're trying to help Bungie, in this case, make the thing for us the way that we need it to work. What that doesn't mean is that like we can say, you know, this is the only solution, make it for us and make it this way. Sometimes that can be the case, but obviously, you know, in this case, I already said there's lots of different ways, and, you know, might see later on in the video, there's tons of different ways that this could be handled, right? It doesn't have to be done the same way WoW does it. It doesn't have to be done even the way that I suggest it. Those are just suggestions or whatever. But giving that feedback of like, you know, these are things that I'm worried about as your customer, as the person that's going to be using this, that is really valuable for your developers. And it really helps them make the right choices as they're moving through the development and eventually into the production process. Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, this is World of Warcraft. This is my character in World of Warcraft over here. And so basically, Let me give you some small details really quick that will be really helpful in understanding everything that I'm about to say. So the way that gear works in WoW is that a piece of gear, like this belt here, has, for my character, it has 2035 strength on it. The stamina is just kind of like a HP stat to make sure as you get higher gear, your health goes up, just higher HP pools because you're going to be taking more damage. That's just kind of a non-relevant number, just kind of like increases your health according to the level of gear. Um, and then you'll see that I have 499 haste and 771 mastery, because the way that gear works in World of Warcraft is that you have a primary stat, much like the one that Bungie said before in that strength example, right? But for WoW, it's always a stat related to your class. So I'm on a paladin, which means I have strength. So that's what you're seeing on this belt here, is I have strength, and then I have two secondary stats. One has more than the other. So in this case, the secondary stat would be mastery, and the quote unquote tertiary stat would be haste. Similar to what we saw in that other example. The reason why this ultimately works out better is because at some point, that just strength value will be more valuable to me and the damage that I do than any amount of haste or mastery. If I was to get a piece of gear, you might see this one is item level 603. If I was to get a piece of gear that was 700, it wouldn't matter at all what the secondary and tertiary stats are. I will drop them because the amount of strength on a item level upgrade that high will be better no matter what, even if they don't have secondary stats. So games like WoW that want you to recycle your gear out can kind of keep pushing that item level and give you that long-term armor grind because you want that main stat. And then while you're getting that main stat, you try and min-max a little bit here and there your quote-unquote secondary and tertiary stats. The reason for this, or part of the reason for this, is because WoW has tier sets. And tier sets do a variety of different things. At this point, we got to be on like tier 18, tier 19, or something like that. And the reason why you move from tier set to tier set is because of this strength value, this primary stat value. It has such a huge control over your damage that you have to leave behind older gear, that you have to unequip your older set bonuses, because you don't have a choice. You are just losing out on straight damage. So if I was to get pieces of gear that were even like 650, realistically, even 650 would be probably high enough main stat here where I would look at putting away my set bonus. There isn't anything like that in Destiny. And the part of the reason why that's so important, especially in WoW and kind of, other games, is because we have access to our previous set bonuses, right? So you can see I have other set gear from other expansions and other patches, but obviously they want you to have that new armor, that new chase. And so something that they do to kind of quote unquote deal with the power creep of the set bonuses, right? Each set bonus isn't necessarily better than the past one. However, that main stat plus your new set bonus will be more damage than you were doing before. And so that's kind of the way they get around doing it, right? You have to chase this ever-growing wall of main stat, and then you're also getting the tier bonuses and stuff like that on the side. And so having these different things to chase in these higher level gear is what makes you put down the older ones. But there's nothing like that in Destiny. There's nothing like that in this example, right? We go back to looking at this, we already see that it's a brawler piece that's going to give strength, right? And it's going to have whatever set bonus comes on, from one of these, right? But there's nothing to make you put down this gear after you've collected it. There's nothing to make you continue this chase. Now, ultimately, that's going to be up to the developers and what they would like to do, right? If they would like to add the ability for them to ever push it forward, right? Make you chase You know, it could be strength for Titans, you know, intellect for warlocks, and then agility for hunters, which is pretty much how it works in WoW and other games. Um, or, you know, maybe they do just want you to make the perfect set and then just kind of chill with it. Or maybe they're going to make them location based, like I mentioned before. Maybe they have this set works in this planet and this set works in that planet. It kind of ends up being a wash on what they think is ultimately going to drive players to engage with this content more. But this is what makes sense for WoW and what WoW has really used in the past. I can tell you for a fact, if I was to compare this set bonus with this previous set bonus, the other one was way better, miles and away better. Like, it was more fun to use. It performed better. It increased my damage more significantly. But if you look at the difference here, that 515 piece of gear only has 1,000, and this is a chest, only 1,195 strength, versus my current chest, which is only 100 item levels, but it has more than double the strength value. This piece is way stronger than what the other one had, no matter how good the set bonus is. And that's kind of ultimately what I think they will need to do if they want to not power creep these set bonuses an insane amount. Because that's something that they do have to be aware of, right? They need to be aware of something when it comes to power creep and make sure that they're not just trivializing everything in the game and making it impossible for them to actually balance and create challenging content. So hopefully that gives kind of a little bit of an insight into why I think ultimately this already has flaws in it and already has things that we need to be careful about and considerations that the team over at Bungie really needs to make. You know, there needs to be, if their goal truly is this like kind of long-term pursuit, right, where they don't want you to just have your one roll of gear and that's it, then there's a lot of things for them to consider. And I honestly don't know how they would do it with their current system. You don't have any actual true primary stat to actually drive anyone to put down anything. And so if a player just gets pieces of gear for the set that they want, there will not be any reason that I can see in here to ever put it down. And I think that's ultimately a problem, right? That's what they want to solve, but they're just not quite doing it in a way that actually works. And to be honest, what I would actually recommend is not necessarily that they do what the, you know, what WoW is doing. They don't need to necessarily do that, but what they could do is they could change, you know, how much total you get as you keep going up, right? And maybe, you know, obviously, you know, it would be, they'd have to figure it all out on the back end more. Maybe instead of increasing the cap only from 100 to 200, maybe they keep, you know, every year they get a little more stats. You know, maybe instead of next year getting from 2 to 300, maybe you go from 2 to 250. And then you keep, as you get higher level gear, you get more value from your gear by upgrading it, you get more stats, etc. There's a lot of different ways they could look about doing it, but if they don't do it correctly, it will ultimately end up being a band-aid and not actually a fix for the problem that they set out to fix.